Hey everyone, this is Nitro. So, in this video I am going to go over some of my more recent Apex matches, and it's going to be the very first week of Apex matches, so we'll see how those ones go. So at that point, SP Elwin didn't exist yet, for example, so there will be some differences with, I guess, some upcoming weeks. Nonetheless, it should be interesting to see because surprisingly, a lot of the older strategies worked. Just wanted to make sure the chat box is working, and it looks like it. There we go. It showed up. Perfect. So let's begin. You guys can see that I have 27 wins and 20 losses right now. The craziest thing about this is I went back to my bad tendency of testing out new boxes before getting into Langrisser rank. So actually, before this week, you can say I'm actually at 22 wins and 10 losses. It was kind of ridiculous. If you look at my most recent 15 battles, I actually only have 5 wins and 10 losses. So the experimentation, you can see here, 1 loss, 2 losses, 1 loss, 1 win, 1 loss, 2 losses, 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 wins, 3, 2 wins, 4 losses, 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 losses, 3 wins, 5 losses, 3 wins, 6 losses, win and win. So these are my 5 wins here. And then here's the 7th loss, the 8th loss, the 9th loss, and the 10th loss. So my recent matches have been actually pretty terrible because I started experimenting after getting to the 1800 ranking level. I just have a very bad tendency of doing that. I really should be aiming to get to Langrisser rank first before experimenting, but whatever. Yeah, my current box, you can see I've thrown in Akaya, for example. I've thrown in Hiei, I've thrown in Illustrial, I've thrown in Zerida. So this was not the box I used to grind up to the 1800 level. Playing around with it, we'll see how it goes. In any case though, let's begin going over some of those more recent matches that I've mentioned. So let's just scroll down all the way to the near bottom and start looking at the Season 5 boxes, if you will. These initial ones are the qualifying matches, so maybe I'll just skip those, right? Because the qualifying matches, I still wasn't even sure what I was doing at that point yet. Maybe starting here would be good. Right, let's take a look. I actually don't remember a lot of these matches, full disclosure, so we'll see. So here, at this point, I was still experimenting with the box, okay? And here, I was still running a lot more of the AoE style. So I still had Gizroff here, Hobo, Bozel, Licorice, Listel even, you know. So it was still very much my, actually, this was pretty much my Season 5 box, actually. And very much a hit or miss as a result. So I'm just going to quickly go, you know what, I'm just going to quickly skip this pick ban phase, given that it was my Season 5 box. But what I ended up with for the first match was Bozel, Ares, Arianrod, Sophia, and Landius. So I thought I had a very powerful box. My opponent though was running fairly similar. Landius with Hiei, Deedlit, Claret, and Sage of the Trees. So I actually thought I had a very good box here, especially since I could use Sophia to provide what is effectively a faction buff to Arianrod, Bozel, and Landius. So Landius was able to run route. But what happens was, I think I actually lost this one. So first things first, my soldier choice on Landius was actually advantageous to me too, right? Because I have cavalry soldiers against infantry soldiers. Right. He does start by laying down Hobo's terrain effects. And I of course start with the mass heal to be the effective faction buffer for my party members. So Hiei has a gospel effect, which can act as a faction buff for him. So I just retreated back my area and rod a little, just to kind of just try to avoid Hiei. And now we just saw that Hiei activated Breeze. And now I'm just using Sophia to continue to provide the faction buff effect. So now what happens is I begin my assault with area and rod. Single target strike to start, act again, Grand Cross, get that AoE damage in, right? And Hiei quickly respawns with an AoE and a single target strike, which does not even kill my Ares. Right? Because I already did Grand Cross, it wiped out so many of the soldiers and whatnot on Hiei that Hiei just had no damage to take down my Ares. So I thought I was in a really, really, really good situation now, right? But then I moved my Landius up, and thus Bozo couldn't attack. So that was my mistake there, right there, right? By moving Landius forward, Bozo was no longer guarded, and Claret could easily get in the charge to take down my Bozo. So be it. You know, after all, nothing I can do at this point. And now I have Ares activate Fearless Hurricane, and I had Ares attack Hiei, and that actually killed Hiei. Actually killed off my damaged Ares. Also, not what I was expecting. Okay, my impression was Hiei was so heavily damaged that he shouldn't do enough damage to take down Ares. Nope. Ares died. It ended up being a trade, 1-for-1, instead of my Ares killing and then retreating back into Landius' Guard Rage. So suddenly, I am at a big disadvantage. I already lost 2 characters while my opponent only lost 1. So, some really careless mistakes there, basically. And now, Deedlit, infantry class Deedlit, takes down my Landius for the first time. His full hit point Landius finishes off my Landius second time. I only have 2 characters. Instant loss. Did very well initially, then it went terribly after that. Just made some very careless mistakes in that first fight. That was basically it. So, the next match shows why Akaya has become so popular recently. So, and why I actually moved Akaya into my box as well. So, at this, as I mentioned, I have been experimenting with my box, right? And here I'm running like very similar to what I'm currently running, but with fewer tanks. Actually, I only have 2 tanks here right now, but I ran a very offensively oriented box with Akaya, Zerida, Hiei, Eleventh are all here, but there was also a whole mix of AoEs. Actually, I think I removed all my healers here. Yeah, the only healer I have now is Liana. So, as I mentioned, I was just playing around with it, trying various things. And here I decided to just go, the only healer is Liana. There's a few, support healers like Licorice and Deedlit, but it was kind of basically an experiment. So, he banned my Akaya to start. I banned his juggler to start, and so he played Landius. Okay. Wait. Now, right away, I ended up playing Liana anyway, so I ended up getting a tank and a healer. So it didn't end up being exactly, the offensively oriented box that I thought I would be playing. Reen, Hiei ban, he plays Ares, Right? I now ban his Iris and Liana, playing my Hobo. Right? Faction buff for my Juggler, basically. He gets rid of more of my Mythic party heroes. So Bozel and Arianrod are now both banned as well. He plays Zerida. So I ban his Licorice, ban his Joshua, playing my Illustrial. And then I lose Deedlit and Licorice, leaving me just Gizaroth and Landius. Opponent plays Sophia, so he ends up getting a healer anyways. I get rid of Deedlit and Yusuke now, playing my Gizaroth at the end. And my opponent plays Rachel. So we can see like not too many people had adjusted their boxes yet initially. And since he does have Sophia, he is running Peace of Mind and Route on Landius. This is a Heart of Alhazard backstab Bloodbath Zerida. And Ares is just, yeah, whatever. Initially, laying down Light Array. Opponent I actually didn't play this one as well either. Full disclosure. For example, when I placed Illustrial here, right, due to Dazzling Light, her mobility is completely blocked. So I would have... Actually, I'm not sure if her mobility is blocked as an Archer class. Doesn't look like it is. I can move 5 tiles. Yeah. It's just, in order to have maximum mobility with Illustrial, you need to go through defensive terrain. And the defensive terrain is up here. So I really should have been moving Illustrial up to the north, so that I can move through the terrain and probably kill off Ares, for example. Some very careless positioning errors. But all I can say in my defense is I was very rusty at this point. I have not played since the round of 256. And so right off, Zerida gets to assassinate my healer. So down goes Liana. But I did manage to get a mobility buff on Juggler. And so I just jumped right in, locking down his healer and locking down Rachel. Meanwhile, Sage of the Trees smacks Zerida a little bit. And what's even worse is, I wasn't paying attention, he had routes, my Juggler gets hit with route, stunned, and then gets hit by the Rachel. Well, Sage of the Trees kills off Zerida, provides a bunch of healing to Juggler this way. And Juggler manages to continue to live somehow. Not for long though. It did occupy him for a bit of time though. He has Ares choose a target to attack. And the target he chose was... Hobo. Taking him down. So, don't have a healer anymore. Right, first Liana died, now Hobo's dead. At this point, it's Gizaroth and Illustrial against Landius, Sophia, and Rachel. But I was able to start off a little bit with Gizaroth's construct getting some good damage in, right? Managing to silence this Landius and damaging Rachel significantly, and so weakening Sophia a bit. He heals Rachel, and I just have Illustrial jump in to take down Sophia to start. It's now Gizeroff against Rachel and Landius, which is pretty much a huge mess. He still has a tank and a healer, so another careless loss early on. So you can kind of see that I'm still I was experimenting a lot with, you know, adjusting things and but at the same time I was not playing well in the early stages. It was just a bunch of practice with the season 5 boxes, and it was just mistake after mistake to start. So eventually, though, you know, I started playing, you know, some more AoE boxes. These were just experiments, like running tons of AoE characters, and they just didn't work. And so finally, I just started. I think I started adjusting to various things, like these 0.5 battles were matches where I started doing more experiments, if you will. Trying out other boxes. For example, let's see. Let's give this one a take a look. Hello, hello. So here I was still using. So at this point, I've started adjusting and bringing more single target attackers. So no more pure AoE boxes. I realized that AoE was just not working, especially with a whole bunch of revivals. At least that was what I was seeing. So I started trying out, you know, bringing a few more single targets like Yulia. I swapped in Ledin, for example, swapped in Rosenseal, even though she's still 3 stars. But I still had I still had quite a few AoEs overall. So, but yeah. So right now I have, for this battle, I had 3 tanks. So Ledin, Landius, and Juggler. Yulia is here, Deedlit is here, and I have the healers were just 2, it looks like, Liana and Wowler right now. So it seems like I removed one of my, no, Liana, Wowler, and Rosenseal were my 3 healers. So it was 3 tanks, 3 healers with a mix of AoEs and single targets. So I had removed Akaya here. So lost Juggler. Both sides are banning Juggler. Landius picks is pretty typical. I banned his Liana and Licorice. He banned my Reen and Ares. I played Yulia. He banned my Hobo and Gizeroff and played Ares. Very typical second pick if I leave Ares alone. But since he did that, I banned his remaining healers. Right? Since he played Ares, I was able to get rid of Iris and Sophia. And I played Ledin next. So now he gets rid of my Liana and Rosenseal, leaving me still Wowler as a healer option. He plays Deedlit. So Hobo, Joshua banned now. I play my Wowler, lose all that remains. And I lose Licorice and Bozel. He plays Yusuke, and now I have the choice of Zerida and Deedlit. I get rid of his CA and Bozel. So my final pick was Deedlit for more healing, and his final pick was Ariane Rod instead of Zerida. Ledin. My Ledin is currently running the Redeemers because the Redeemers Redeemers are actually quite an interesting soldier. As long as your character has no debuffs, if the character dies, he will revive once with 20% hit points. But on the flip side, after triggering this revival, the max hit points drops by a certain percentage. At my level, it's currently 26% hit point drop. So it's actually rather interesting. At the very least though, it means your tank revives and can tank hits one more time at the bare minimum. So my play is basically 2 tanks, 3 characters who can provide both healing and attack. And my goal was obviously to just tank hits and survive. So I actually, in this case, I actually ran Deedlit not as a healer, but as a damage dealer. So she is actually bringing Accelerated Aid to provide +1 mobility. She has Gospel, and she has Spirit Dancer, which is just a self-heal skill. Since my Deedlit is once again in the Mage class, she does have no problems taking out, let's say, Cavalry Landius, but she doesn't provide healing with Gift of Eternal Life. Alright, so... It's actually, oh, I know, the reason why I'm running her in Mage class, as a side note, is because I only have 2 Gifts of Eternal Lives. So, and they're currently on Hobo, has one of them, and Yulia has the other. So, given that I don't have a 3rd Gift of Eternal Life, I might as well just make use of Deedlit in this kind of class. And I decide to aggressively have my Let-In attack. It got a little bit interesting there because he did have the opportunity, let's say, you know, have Ares wipe out one of my characters here, for example, or Wind Whisper and potentially wipe out a whole bunch of characters, but instead he chose to have Deedlit attack my Let-In. Maybe not realizing I had Desperate Prayer activated. Not sure why he did that. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'll take full advantage of that. And I begin with having my Deedlit strike. So I actually made a mistake there as well. Let-In with Righteous Duel only deactivates the Let-In with Righteous Duel only reduces the enemy's mobility by 3. So this Cavalry Landius was actually able to move out of range. It's not the same as Yulia's Godly Menace, right? In the case of Yulia's Godly Menace, it reduces the it also reduces the enemy's mobility by 3. That's it. So you cannot actually completely disable Landius. Interesting. It's not like Juggler's Beast Shock, where mobility is completely removed. In this case, it's just like it's an aura that reduces mobility by 3. And it does disable guard, but if the enemy moves out of range, their guard is no longer disabled. Well, so be it. He now has Ares, Charge In, and Wind Whisper. Probably the worst positioning for that Wind Whisper possible, right? My vulnerable characters were the back ones, Wilder and Yulia. Instead, he Wind Whispered my more tanky characters, and so nobody really died. But the flip side is, by Wind Whispering like that, he can move Ares back into Landius' guard range. And he does follow up that attack with Ariane Rod. So I lost buffs. For example, Deedlit no longer has the Wilder high stakes. Landius did keep his though, and so did Let-In. So there is not much I can do about that though. There has to be a luck element in this. And now he follows up with another AoE. So I'm just totally ignoring it. And I have Yulia Godly Menace strike the enemy Landius to start. And provide a whole bunch of healing to my party members. So once again, Landius retreats back, right? Continuing to guard at least Deedlit and Yusuke. First he retreated from Let-In, now he retreats from Yulia. Oops. This was where I thought my Landius had Ragnarok, but apparently he doesn't. So I didn't break the last rites, which I think was up, right? Yeah, I didn't break last rites, and so didn't get to do any additional damage. But in the first place, I actually didn't even go through his Stealing Warriors. So the Stealing Warriors just tanked the whole hit from my Landius, which was actually kind of interesting. Yusuke attack. And so I just finish off his Ares since it's not guarded. Now, interesting point there. Okay, the Yusuke attack is with Dark Tinker is supposed to apply cannot be healed on your characters, right? Well, it actually didn't. And the reason for that is actually the reason why I brought Accelerated Aid. Accelerated Aid will grant the character immunity for 1 turn. Okay. So because of that, you can see Landius had immunity to all debuffs for 1 turn and immunity to effects that reduce mobility and Curse of Wounding for 1 turn. So I basically had that immunity. So I had Gospel, I think, on Ledin, and I had the Deedlit providing the Accelerated Aid immunity. Or sorry, not Accelerated Aid, Spirit Dancer immunity. Sorry, I mixed up the skills. Spirit Dancer provides the immunity to all debuff effects. Accelerated Aid provides the immunity to just mobility reduction and Curse of Wounding. So that's why I decided to bring Spirit Dancer instead of Elven Aura. So that immunity has made it so that the Dark Tinker did nothing. At this point, you can kind of see that my box is mixed in very deeply with his. And he is trying to regroup, get everyone next to his Landius once more. I have Wilder move up and attack because Wilder didn't have any. Wilder did not have any skills active. Right, I already used high stakes. I already used regroup to heal Wilder himself, and I used mass heal last turn. So given that's the case, the best option for me there was to simply attack Deedlit, and that's exactly what I did. So next, Yulia moves in and takes down Deedlit. Oh yeah, sorry guys. I'm just making lots of mistakes in what I'm saying today. Yes, Yulia reduces mobility by 3 within 2 blocks, so Landius was unable to guard. Yeah, so that's why he moved his Landius back there just now. At this point, right, because he is still getting the mobility reduction and cannot guard, he moved his Landius back, but I can easily have Yulia follow and continue to ignore guard. And that's exactly what I did, right? While Godly Menace was still up for 1 last turn, I had Yulia move up and get that final strike to wipe out the enemy Deedlit. So now Ares died and then Deedlit died, one after another. Yulia gets killed, but she does revive, which makes it easy for me to, let's say, have my Ledin charge forward and strike. And the interesting thing was, I kept finding is that my Landius is total garbage in damage dealing. Once again, I thought after the Ledin Weakening Strike, I thought this Landius with 7,000 hit points would fall to a Lancer Landius, but didn't. To be fair, my Lancer Landius does have the Blood Pact, and Blood Pact offers no attack bonus, right? So my attack is frankly quite garbage. And actually, the other thing is Grand Cross from Arianrod had removed my 20% attack buff as well. So with only 1,215 attack, I was doing absolutely nothing to this Landius with 925 defense, even though I'm Lancer class. So it takes and even Dietlit jumping in didn't offer enough damage to kill this Landius. But he's pretty much in a similar boat. 972 defense let in, tanked this hit from this Yusuke who no longer had attack skills. So I was heavily damaged there too. But once again, what we're seeing is like, it's like this is like a mud match, you know? Characters are attacking each other constantly and not killing things, right? And the other reason for this total lack of damage is because it was Holy Class against Holy Class. It seemed, I believe, I'm not entirely sure, but I think Holy Class against Holy Class don't seem to do as much damage as they should. So that's also why Yusuke with Zealots and with himself did barely any damage to my Ledin. No, 5 against 3, there's absolutely no way he can come back from this. Doesn't even matter if he kills off a few more characters of mine or not. It's totally over. Especially since he has no ability to heal anymore. So there we go, another character dies, down to Yusuke. Let's just exit this match at this point. So basically what I realized, and I had a whole bunch of matches that were kind of like this, like basically mud fights, if you will, where characters would be constantly fighting each other and probably not dying. And so I eventually started modifying my box as a result. Okay. Actually, maybe I'll show this loss. It was actually kind of fairly interesting because I lost to Rainforce of all heroes. So for this particular match, still haven't really adjusted my box yet. Still using a lot of AoE attackers, stuff like this. And Skello obviously gets to play his Rainforce. So in terms of the pick ban, I'm not sure if I should go over it, but Landius, right? I lose my Ares and Zerida as usual, so Juggler, Ares, Zerida. Actually, the Zerida was a bit of a surprise. He plays Rainforce. I ban his Liana and Wilder. This is probably where I really should have played green, but I played Yulia. Yeah. I lose Liana and Licorice. He plays Rachel. Right. He loses Ares and Bozel now, and then I play Rosenseal. So my thought here was I have Rosenseal for protection against debuffs, and I should be fine, right? Well, he bans my Hobo and Dietlit, playing Rosalia. And now I'm in his Zerida and Angelina, playing my Gizaroth. Probably a big mistake there. But the Gizaroth was basically, my thought was, Gizaroth can buff up both Rosenseal and Yulia. Well, I lose Reen and Ledin now, and he plays Gizaroth, and I have the choice between Bozel and Wilder. So I chose to play Bozel. So with this map having water in the center, I decided to have Gizaroth doing Leviathans. And I start off, of course, I just decided to start off Rosenseal with Crystal Ward. Provided, you know, a whole bunch of protection against debuffs. So Rachel casting Gospel on herself. Bit of a surprise there. Both sides, of course, dropping constructs on turn 1. And Rainforce starts off with Sonic Blade to get 1 stack of that otherworldly force ring. I have the construct kill itself. I was hoping to get some good debuffs onto Rainforce. It ended up being a mobility reduction and cannot heal yourself, which aren't particularly useful against him. And he just jumps in, damages everyone, meaning he gets 7 stacks of and gets to act again. Right? So because I had the construct, it meant I had 6 characters on the field. So Otherworldly Force gave him an act again right on turn 1. After the Sonic Blade. So he got to, he ended up moving up, Eclipse, Lunar Flare, then teleports back into Langrisser's guard range. And that was actually enough debuffs to weaken my crystal barriers, but not enough to actually apply debuffs yet. At the very least, Rosenseal is keeping all my characters super healthy, right? Or at least reasonably healthy. So Rainforce is now going to turn into a very major annoyance, I think, because he does have the 4 movement and he can keep stacking those effects on me. So I'm having Rosenseal keep my party healthy for now. And then Rosalia starts activating Chivalry, Sword of Protection, moving in, and then backs off. I was just like, why did he back off? I didn't really understand that, but he moved back. And then Rainforce launches out another Sonic Blade. 3 stacks of Otherworldly Force now. Rosalia gets a strike on my Landius. Doesn't really do enough damage to kill him. Gizoroth now jumps in with his AoE, damaging Yulia and Bozol a bit. And then does the ultimate construct attack on my Landius, which was not enough to kill him. I mean, ultimate construct really doesn't do all that much damage at the end of the day, so I thought it was okay. And now Rachel jumps in with Runic Void. So, Runic Void, first, provides a lot of healing to his remaining characters. Second, it took down my Landius' first life. And finally, I am starting to get debuffs. Right? After all, Runic Void does apply 5 stacks of debuffs. So with that, Rosenseal's crystal barrier, if you will, was actually broken. And now, Lunar Eclipse once again. AoE, act again. Lunar Flare. Another AoE. Right? And then Otherworldly Force teleportation back. Once again. No, once again though, nobody actually died. Despite everything. Look at the number of fixed damage debuffs that are on Yulia. Absolutely insane. Landius has a whole bunch too. 6 of them. So pretty much all my characters have insane numbers of debuffs now. The ones that took those hits. Yeah. Insane number on Rosenseal. Insane number on Yulia. Crazy amount on Landius. No. Bozol and Gizoroth were in front so they didn't get hits. But yeah. So I start off with Bozol tossing out an Earthquake, managing to get a crazy number of silences now. Right? Remember, Bozol's exclusive armor now applies a debuff as well. So between his talent debuff, the extra debuff from his armor, and Miracle Staff, I was actually able to silence everyone that I hit with that AoE. So, do what I can. Rosenseal mass heals and then dies to all the fixed damage. Alright. But she does provide some healing to all my other characters and a few more shields, crystal barrier effects, after dying. So, his construct has only one range, and mine have two. But I'm totally not doing enough damage to it. It's actually interesting because, well, it's because the constructs have the 40% damage reduction, and with these swords of protection providing extra stats, he actually didn't take all that much from my construct. So now, this is where the item on Yulia saved me. I'm running Meditation Ring on Yulia. So with Meditation Ring, all of these don't do any damage to her at all. So she was just able to move up, take no damage whatsoever. So actually, the situation actually is not that bad. The only character, Rosenseal died to the fixed damage, and Landius is taking a whole bunch. But the other, Yulia, Gizroff, and Bozol are still okay. So now, Yulia runs in, and I had Yulia strike the construct and start healing up my other characters a bit. Yeah. What was also annoying was Rachel managed to survive against my construct and provide some healing to the other characters. So for example, Rainforce no longer has... Rainforce can now use AoEs again. Oh well. So, and then frustratingly enough, Rachel managed to get off one final strike, so she provided some more healing to Rainforce, Rosalia, and Landius before dying. So Rachel providing those healings was pretty clutch in keeping him alive. And now Rosalia, activating both skills once again, one-shots my Bozol. So it's now Gizroff and Yulia against 4 enemies. Lunar Flare yet again. Oh, Yulia quickly wipes out Rainforce. And provides a bunch of healing to my Gizroff. So actually it's not as bad as it seemed. I have the construct, suicide attack, and do a bunch of AoE damage to him. And my Yulia is surprisingly being able to keep Gizroff alive. Once again, Yulia strike. Yulia is basically rampaging right now, right? Yulia just, took off Landius' first life. And now he has his Gizroff drop a summon, ultimate construct, and attack once more. Now this is where I made a big mistake. Okay? I dropped my construct with Gizroff, and I thought this construct would have enough damage to kill off Landius, right? But what I didn't realize was my construct did not get the damage reduction buff, right? The buff that provides 40% damage increase and 40% reduced damage. So because of that, when my construct attacked this Landius, it actually died. Right? And with that death, I'm now no longer blocking the path to my Yulia, so Rosalia is able to attack my Yulia, killing her off. Which unfortunately ended the fight. So that was definitely an RNG element, right? If this construct had actually gotten that 40% attack, 40% damage increase and 40% damage decrease, he would have been able to attack and kill Landius. Then Rosalia would not have any method of attacking my Yulia. And then I could have potentially made a comeback from there. Potentially. Well, since that didn't happen though, we'll never know. But it would have been overall, it was a very interesting match. That's what I thought. You know, his Rainforce rampaged hard, but my Yulia with the Meditation Ring was almost able to pull off a comeback, despite everything. It just shows how disgustingly powerful Yulia is, frankly speaking. What's next? I guess I'll show this match as well, against Kel'Thuzad. So for this match, taking a quick look, it still is the same box, right? With 3 tanks and 3 healers. And Kel'Thuzad, let's just see how the pick ban goes. So Juggler ban, he banned my Rosenseal to start, I play my Juggler, right? So he bans Leah and Waller, getting rid of all 3 of my healers right away. He plays Landius. I ban his Reen and Ares, so Juggler, Reen, Ares, my standard ban order. I play Licorice right off. He now bans my Zerida and Ares, playing Rachel. And I ban his Bozel and Deedlit, playing my Hobo. So right now, all 3 heroes do provide some healing in one form or another. Right? Next, I lose Yulia and Deedlit, so he gets rid of a few more of my remaining, combat healers, if you will, and he plays Zerida. Okay, so I ban Hiei and Arianrod, playing Reen. So next, Bozel, Gizaroff, ban, leaving me Landius and Ledin. He plays Yusuke now, and so I ban Waller and Liana. Right? I don't want him to have any kind of act again. And I played Ledin. And finally, he will play Iris. Actually, Michael, the interesting thing is even 3-star Rosenseal is usable. That match that I just fought, I was using a 3-star Rosenseal. And yeah, Rainforce is pretty brutal with the constant AoEs, but if you have immunity to fixed damage, he's actually not as terrifying as you might think. Okay, so with my box, Reen has self-healing, Sage of the Trees does provide healing, and Licorice is bringing both Dark Despair and Mass Heal to act as sort of a healer. So, and then I'm also having Sage of the Trees bring a faction buff because Juggler and Reen could both use it. Ledin is buffing himself with Righteous Duel as well. I don't have a dedicated healer right now at all, but I do have a bunch of characters that can kind of provide healing. And this battle actually gets kind of interesting, from what I remember. one thing as well is the only character that is really vulnerable to Zerida assassination right now, for me, is just Licorice. Reen has very high defense. Okay. Ledin has very high defense. Juggler has very high defense. And Sage of the Trees has Revival, Indomitable. So there's actually no one he can really assassinate as long as I block them from... as long as I block Zerida from reaching Licorice, who is my healer. Demonic Advance, hoping to get a mobility buff, didn't happen. And now his Zerida activates Heart of Kalhazard. So I'm just forming up the wall, right, to keep Licorice alive. Need to protect myself against Zerida. The other advantage I have right now is because I'm player 1, the Iris teleport isn't all that great. Oh, and I finally got a mobility buff onto one of my characters from Sage of the Trees, applying +3 mobility onto Juggler. So I'm continuing to block the path, right, and keeping my Licorice just out of range. So Zerida charges in and chooses to assassinate Hobo. Right? But Indomitable revives you with 20% hit points, while Hellfire Archers only do 15% damage. So Hellfire Archers cannot take off your life. What he was aiming for there was the assassination, and then obviously having Rachel run in next. Right? Rachel come in with an Arcane Blast and finish off my Hobo. So I countered very quickly by having Juggler teleport, having Juggler Sacred Beast him next to the enemy Rachel, so he can't attack me. So that way, he can't attack. He does Arcane Blast me, but whatever. So then I have Juggler run back and strike the enemy Zerida. Unfortunately, not doing enough damage to actually kill. I thought B-Shock would actually kill this Zerida, but it actually managed to survive. Oh. So be it. Let's Wave Whisper and knock back a whole bunch of the enemies, knocking them out of the fight. So with that knockback, Rachel can't jump into the fight, and Yusuke currently can't either. Because Yusuke would move 3, and at this point, Dark Tinker only has 3 range, so he can't even attack anyone. So the Wave Whisper from Sage of the Trees has pushed 2 of the enemies out of the fight, and then I have my Ledin Wretch's dual Zerida to make sure I can take her down. He has Landius try to jump in, you know. And what I'm seeing repeatedly is nowadays, since all the tanks pretty much have 1000 defense, you're not killing them. Like, you're just not killing them with your tank strikes. Okay. Tank attacks on vulnerable characters like Rachel can very well take them down. Tank attacks on tanks will never work, pretty much. So this is what I meant over and over again by, you know, a lot of these fights turning into, you know, mud matches, because you're just not seeing characters be able to kill each other. Well, in any case, let's mass heal a bit. Heal up my party members and also get some terrain effects, some damage into Zerida, a debuff onto Landius, cannot receive buffs. And finally, I had Reen launch out an AoE. And that was enough damage to take down Zerida. But it did buff up Yusuke, right? Since Zerida died, Yusuke got plus mobility as well as plus range. So he was then able to, before Zerida died, if we just go back a little bit, before Zerida died, he could only move 3 to here. and only attack 30. After Zerida died, with extra mobility, he was able to move into the mountains and attack at 4 range. So Yusuke was able to get off the Dark Tinker attack, which hit Ledin, but didn't kill him. It did apply cannot be healed on him though. But Ledin tanked that hit just fine. So I just had my Ledin start moving back. There's 2 turns for it to wear off. Rachel teleportation forward, right? I believe the goal of this teleportation forward was to get into a position where he could attack Licorice and then thus kill off Ledin. So I just countered by moving Rin forward and launching out the AoE. With that AoE, Iris is knocked down to 11% hit points, and everyone else got a few debuffs. I applied a whole bunch of cannot be healed. Yusuke got cannot be healed, Landius got cannot be healed and cannot receive buffs and passives disabled. Rachel had kept gospeling herself, so she got nothing, but debuffs on everyone else. Rachel attacks, mud match once again, can't kill off my tanks. And then I Dark Despair, terrain effects, damage. Could not hit Iris, who is just out of range, but I'm not going to complain about that. Iris has to self-heal pretty much right now. Right now, on both sides, nobody is really dying. That's what we're seeing. So, Sage of the Trees does a single target strike, and that's not enough damage to kill either. Hobo survived. Barely survived, but survived. And then finally, Kel'Thuzad just gives up. Too many heavily damaged characters, and so he finally gave up. Fairly interesting match. At least with things like having to jump forward to prevent Rachel's movement, stuff like that. Yeah, Oldius' skill Wave Whisper is actually really, really good. Ridiculously so, with the knockback. I actually lost a few matches because Oldius the enemy Oldius kept activating clocks on Wave Whisper, and he just kept knocking me back over and over and over again until some characters could not actually get out of the poison. For example, did you know Juggler cannot move into safety because of the terrain effects and stuff like that? At a match where Juggler got knocked so far back that he couldn't get back into the terrain due to him being aquatic and whatnot. Or, sorry, not aquatic. Due to Juggler having Terrain Master, he needs 2 mobility to move on any of those tiles. Alright, so after that, I think I started adjusting my strategy to... I started playing a standard strategy that grinded me up to the 1800 level. Okay. So here, this started becoming my more standardized pick band, if you will. So that guy has an Akaya box. I actually played around with the Akaya box recently. It's actually pretty fun, I have to say. But it is hard to fit in the characters. Right now, it feels like the biggest struggle is figuring out how to fit characters into the 15 characters that you can select. In any case though, Juggler ban, Rosenseal ban. So he plays Landius, I ban Rosenseal and Rin. I've actually been allowing Ares through quite a bunch, and I played my Juggler to start. Now I lose Rin and Deedlit, okay? And he plays Rachel. been interesting seeing Rachel as a second pick of all things. So whatever, I'll get rid of Ares and Listel. Right? I'll play my Yulia, and he gets rid of Liana and Wilder. So once again, all 3 healers are banned. Rosenseal, Liana, Wilder. That seems to be a very popular ban. Right? It happened last game, happened again this game. So that guy plays Bozol. I ban his Licorice and Zerida, playing my Zerida now. So I lose Ares and Licorice, and he plays Liana. I get rid of Akaya and Arianrod at this point, and I play Hobo. And finally, I lose Lustriel and Bozol, leaving me Ledin and Gizerov. My opponent plays Deedlit, and of the 2 characters I have left, I decided to play Ledin. Could have played Gizerov if I wanted everybody to be mythical, but I started realizing that Gizerov just does not. I mean, he has some uses, but he also has a lot of vulnerability. He's not that great at the same time. Hello, guildmate. So, for this fight, that guy has a lot of healing along with Bozol, right? He has Rachel for combat healing, he has Deedlit for healing before combat, as well as combat healing with Elven Aura and Gift of Eternal Life. He also has Liana. And I think it was because he was so confident in all this healing that he had Liana not bring heal, instead bringing Summon Sky Archer. Which, if I recall properly, ends up being a major mistake. So for this fight, because I have Ledin to buff up Yulia, I ended up having Zerida bring her faction buff to buff up Juggler, and that way Sage of the Trees did not have to bring a faction buff. He's not buffed, but at the same time he doesn't have to bring a faction buff. So that allows me to do things like laying down terrain effects, which would really prevent both Bozol's and Rachel's movements. Right? Because they're both bringing sorceresses, they both got terrain blocked. So I was expecting them to bring sorceresses because of this map having lots of sky tiles, and he did. And now his characters can't move through terrain properly. I'm now just kind of taking advantage of that. Since he can't AoE me to start, Zerida gets off the opportunity to go Heart of Alhazard. And actually, he has Bozol puts my Ledin to sleep. I was kind of I meant for that to happen. I was pretty much baiting for that by moving Ledin forward like this. And he now has Elven Aura Strike from Juggler on my Yulia. And then I jump in with my Juggler. Arcane Blast is launched out, and it does not do enough damage to kill off my Yulia. So, Yulia with that AoE is not enough because my Yulia actually has very high magic defense, 713. Yeah. Was fairly close, but wasn't enough. The whole point was that I had enough magic defense on her. So, barely survived, but she lived. You're right, it got pretty darn close, but hey, close is not enough in this game. So then, my Zerida is able to quickly assassinate Bozol to prevent any further AoEs. And I have Yulia jump in to attack. The whole point of that attack was frankly just to heal up. Okay? With the Discipline attack, I knew I could get my Yulia healed up fully, without taking any damage from fighting against Gizerov, or fighting against Landius. And next, some knockback. And that knockback is actually clutch because Juggler was then able to Beast Shock down Rachel. So once again, Wave Whisper becoming key, just like the previous match, right? First, by knocking Sage of the Trees back, it opened up the terrain for me to move forward and be able to attack with Beast Shock while disabling Landius' guard. So, a big play once again from the Sage of the Trees Wave Whisper. Without this knockback, Juggler was stuck where he was. He could only attack Rachel, which would be guarded by Landius. With that knockback, Landius can't guard, and thus Juggler could one-shot Rachel. Suddenly the battle is 5 against 3, that guy gives up. Would I recommend switching Landius to Lancer class? It's I would say yes, but it is definitely much worse for PvE content, I have to say. The reason for Lancer class is really primarily, well, it very much helps counter SP Elwin. That's one of the big things, right? But you are more vulnerable to characters like Deedlit, to Rainforce, those kind of characters. So there's pros and cons to it. That's actually why Landius starts disappearing from people's boxes, right? Because Hilda can be both Lancer and Cavalry, whereas Landius is kind of locked into one, and it's a bit of a gamble. Okay, so that was where I started realizing, Zerida works out very smoothly for me in these kind of fights. And so I started using Zerida more and more often. Well, the first wanted to demonstrate this match to show Reen basically crushing me. This was an interesting pick ban that my Yuffie's back uses. Okay. So he banned my Ares first. I did my usual Juggler first ban here and played my Juggler. Rosenseal and Leander ban next, and he starts off with Reen. Okay, first pick Reen. That I was like, huh? Okay. So whatever. I just banned whatever, Yulia, Joshua, Arianrod, play my Yualer. I lose Deedlit in Licorice now, so he's banning as many healers of mine as he can. And he plays Yusuke next, right? So I get rid of Leonhard and Gizerov and play Zerida. So he's actually, by the side note, he is actually running a very interesting box. It's all about pretty much buffing his time and space characters, right? There is Gizerov, there's Angelica, there's Yusuke, there's Joshua as well. So I've been banning time and space characters after I banned Juggler, but he's still able to get a faction buff for his time and space and have others, and have mobility buffers like Imelda, Leticia, and Iris. Yeah, almost a full-time box with some mobility buffers. Right now, there's Imelda, there's Leticia, there's Luna, there's Iris, there's even Estelle for mobility buffing. The only character who doesn't really fit this theme is Leon. But Leon offers the Empire faction buff, which still affects a whole bunch of characters here. Anyways, moving on. So I lose Illustrial and Reen. He plays Leon, which was it. I get rid of Zerida and Angelica now, playing my Yulia. He gets rid of my Hobo and Gizerov and plays Imelda. So mobility buffers now. So I get rid of Iris and Estelle, playing my Ledin once again. and he plays Leticia. So once again, I end up with Juggler, Zerida, Yulia, Ledin, and then a healer of some sort. Action buff to start. Reen, activating Spirit Unification. I have my Zerida faction buffing. My strategy doesn't really change, right? Now, Reen, interesting point, has 6 movement. So that means he has 4 base movement from Apex Boots, plus 1 from Ogre for 5 movement, plus 1 from Leticia for 6 movement. And then Imelda, Queen's Whips Reen. So now Reen has 8 mobility. Just like that. So mass mobility stacking on Reen. 8 mobility, no way to really avoid him. So I'm going to start with Zerida activating her Heart of Alhazard. Now, Yulia runs up. Blue Dragon Strike to weaken. And then the Blue Dragon Strike does some crazy random teleportations. So that's why, you know, Leon is mixed in here, right? For that 2-range teleportation to break up formations. I was able to get a regroup heal onto my juggler. But look at that. So what ended up happening there was the regroup heal gave me an act again. And I decided to have my juggler teleport forward instead. Jump the 3 enemies given the positioning instead of trying to protect my characters here. So regroup was probably a mistake because now he Fatal Arc Slashes and kills off both Yulia and Waller. Just like that. I have my juggler take down Yusuke in the far corner. Right? So now he has Imelda and Leticia here, neither of which are very scary in my opinion for juggler. And Desperate Prayer activating allows Ledin to heal up a good amount to tank that hit. Now this is where I make a big mistake. Very big mistake. I thought with Desperate Prayer, Ledin would be fine. Instead, he dies. So I did think that with Desperate Prayer, Ledin wouldn't have an issue surviving when pulling Reen here. But didn't quite go as planned. I heal up, but then I take so much damage in combat that the fixed damage kills him. And then I pile on the mistakes by having Zerida assassinate Leon. See, that was the second very big mistake. What I should have done there was have Zerida assassinate Reen. Right? While I still had, you know, Desperate Prayer and all this good stuff, this was my opportunity to assassinate Reen. But instead I went after Leon, who no longer had Chivalry or Blue Dragon Strike. So big mistake there. My initial thought was, hey, if I kill him, I can probably get out of range of Reen and then reactivate Bloodthirster and kill Reen. But I was not considering the sheer amount of mobility Reen had. So Leticia does an attack on me. And I have Zerida finish off Leticia, and then shift. Right? But despite shifting, Reen could still chase me down. So I really underestimated the amount of mobility he had with the 7 mobility. What I should have... Yes, Zerida can one-shot Reen. This is not a Swordsmith Reen. Right? Remember, he had 4 mobility. So this is not a Swordsmith Reen. A Swordsmith Reen I probably can't assassinate, but this Apex Boots Reen I definitely can. So basically, Reen had more mobility than Leon does. And so Zerida dies. While I kill off Imelda, it's now Juggler against Reen, and my Juggler no longer has a faction buff, no longer has Beast Shock available, so obviously, and meanwhile Reen can continue to launch out his AoEs, so obviously it's game over. So at the end of the day, this was actually a winnable match, just I made a big mistake. If I had assassinated Reen first, very likely could have won that. Oh well, it is what it is. But it does show, like, you know, you make one careless mistake, you're gonna lose these matches. Frankly. After that, I think this battle was like a demonstration of just how powerful 3-star Rosenseal is. If I recall properly. So, I first ban his Rosenseal, he first bans my Juggler, and he starts by playing Sophia. I banned Rosenseal in large part because I knew he only had 3 healers, so if he doesn't pick a healer, I could have just completely stopped him from having healers. So he played Sophia to start. Alright, change of ban strategies. Bozal and Licorice first. And I play Ledin. He gets rid of my Eula in Illustrial. You can see I've been actually slowly adjusting my box with every match, right? Illustrial is in here now, for example. I've just been modifying constantly, trying to figure it out. And he plays Hobo next. Alright, I get rid of Arianrod and Renata, and I play my Zerida second. So Ares and Deedlit are banned. My opponent plays Rosalia, and I ban Ares and Maya get banned on his side, and I play Licorice. So I lose Hobo and Waller. Opponent plays Betty. Alright, so Landius and his remaining 2 tanks are banned. Landius and his 2 tanks that can revive as well. So Landius is gone. Oh my god, what's her name? Albedo is gone. And so next on my side is Liena. Right, start playing my healers. So I lose Bozal and Gizarov. He ends up playing Rachel. I have a choice between Reen without a faction buff and Licorice and Rosenseal, and I actually played Reen. Oh, so my sorry Rose was not referring to Rosenseal, it was referring to Rosalia. My Ledin currently has a Swordsmith set. So he stole the set of gear from Lestel. He stole the Swordsmith medal, he stole the Oath of Justice from Lestel. So he's immune to silencing and immune to, I don't know, whatever it is, fixed damage. It was interesting to see him pick Betty though. So, but I think one of the reasons he picked Betty is to counter my AoEs maybe? I'm actually not quite sure why. of the 3 tanks he had the choice of, right? Why Betty? I didn't really get that. Green enchant Thorns. Thorns does give the opportunity to do things like damage reflection, right? Damage reflection builds, so it just makes more sense. Interestingly enough, he starts off with very early Wave Whisper that only hit one character as well. In the meantime, I'm just holding back, triggering Heart of Alhazard, and then acting again my Zerida. So Rosalia starts jumping in now. And then single target strikes with ultimate judgment. Blood Shield activation. Ledin doesn't even die. Right? If that Blood Shield didn't activate, Ledin was dead because he got a debuff applied onto him. But with the Blood Shield activation, Rosalia fails to one-shot Ledin. So it's kind of like, you know, Claret or whatever. So with that failed assassination, Ledin survives. And Kagamine just gives up. Doesn't even bother to go any further. So, RNGs is playing its role. That's why you equip Bloodlines though, in the first place. So here, I do have a lot of matches where I'm winning with Zerida over and over again. I guess I'll show one more, but my pick ban has been about this. Using single target strikers inherently is super luck based, Michael, that's the thing. Especially if you're attacking a full hit point tank. So it's inherently, if you go single target strike like that, it's generally a big gamble. Unless you have a lot of single target strikers, like your whole box of single target strikers with mobility buffers. But if you're, you know, if you're doing if you're planning on one-shotting like that, you're playing the odds, basically. So juggler ban. I start with Ledin, my remaining tank. I lose Ares and Yulia. So side note, my box has changed in the sense that I no longer have Landius in the box. Right? There's only 2 tanks right now, Ledin and Juggler, because the only character that benefits from Landius faction buff is Hobo, really, in my box. I don't have a Claret, I don't have a Rachel, I don't have Listel. There's very, very little reason to run Landius in my box at this point in time. So that's why I removed him, and I currently just have Ledin and Juggler as my tanks as a result. And that also allowed me to throw in Illustrial, right? For now. So Landius on my side, Landius on my opponent's side. So Reen, Licorice, I play Zerida second. Illustrial is banned, and so is Bozel. Illustrial actually would have been really good on this map as a side note. Windy Outpost is one of the best maps for her. But yeah, so that's probably why she got banned right away. So C plays Bozel. So I get rid of Zerida and Gizaroff, playing my Hobo. Reen, Deedlit ban, and he plays Omega, playing an assassin after I got rid of Zerida. Anyways, Sonya as a striker is pretty decent. right? She has high damage output, but I believe if, let's say, the enemy juggler runs things like Lancer soldiers, she's rendered ineffectual. Right now, she has to run Bone Dinos. And if you run Lancer soldiers, she can't kill you. Probably not Elwin. I don't. My Listel is 5 stars in the first place, so she doesn't have that much of a role in my box right now. Oh, Ares and Listel ban for, and I play the Rosenseal at this point. So playing my 3-star Rosenseal, so I lose Licorice now, and he plays Deedlit. And finally, I get rid of Hobo and Arianrod, and I play my Liana. He has a choice of a final healer, and he plays Liana as well. I'm actually not too afraid of Bozo because I got to play Rosenseal, right? With the Crystal Ward and debuff immunities. Even better, Zerida got a mobility buff. And I conveniently also had Sage of the Trees bring a faction buff. So he has faction buff and Wave Whisper and Indomitable. So Zerida getting the mobility buff, she is bringing her own faction buff, but given that she had already activated a mobility buff, it doesn't make sense to use her faction buff at all. I just Heart of Alahazar right away. So, enemy Deedlit comes charging in right off. And does quite a bit of damage to my Ledin. I have to heal him up. And it gives him the opportunity to act again Disposal to launch an AoE on my party. But thanks to the turn 1 activation of Rosenseal, there are no debuffs on Ledin. Right. So that was the turn 1 Crystal Ward prevented Bozo from applying any debuffs onto my Ledin, which means he can still revive. So that gives me the opportunity to have my Zerida assassinate the enemy Bozo right off the bat. Omega tries to attack Zerida. Ledin tanks the hit and survives with 10 hit points. 10 hit points! I actually took a look afterwards, and what I realized after this battle was that my Ledin had no arena. He had no arena enchants. That's why. So I was missing a whole bunch of hit points, I was missing defense, I was missing stats massively. But it was kind of funny seeing Ledin survive with 10 hit points there. Arena enchants would have made a big difference. It wouldn't have been that close, but the survival really helped. In the meantime, he's continuing to throw damage into my Ledin, but Ledin is continuing to heal up between every combat, and even though he's not doing any damage, he's surviving. Another attack on Ledin. Another failure to kill. And I just finally, I guess, just decided to Wave Whisper, hit them back a bit. Finally just move back. So this one surprised me. Omega one-shotted my Zerida. But I think that was because he was attacking from terrain. Right? First, Omega had activated Breeze, so he could actually move into range to attack. And second, because he was attacking from terrain, he got the Shinobi should have gotten extra damage. Right? So even though my Zerida was at full hit points, I thought she could survive, but Omega actually one-shotted her. Really didn't expect that. That was a big surprise to me. Well, whatever. Let's pull the enemy tank to me and have Ledin attack. Side note, having all of these heroes having Tenyo's headdresses really helped, because if I just go back a turn just now, Ledin had the restore 20% hit points after battle. So having 3 other characters that can provide Tenyo's headdress buffs really helped in keeping him alive. Because he could attack with Righteous Duel, take a whole bunch of damage, and then afterwards heal up twice. So Deedlit jumps in, Thorn trigger, Deedlit dies. Would have been interesting to see if Deedlit dies without the Thorns trigger, but I don't know, right? Because at that point I did have my Righteous Duel up, right? So Righteous Duel providing way more attack with King's Will, it would have been interesting. In any case though, with Thorns, Deedlit killed herself, and then since I took damage, I could have Sage of the Trees melee strike Langius to heal up via Gift of Eternal Life and so on. And Crystal Warlocks, of course. So, I now use my act again to reactivate Hobo. Omega tries to assassinate Liana, but since Omega does not 3 times my Liana's 195 skill, it just does a whole bunch of damage to the Shrine Maidens. In the first place, I really don't think Omega can one-shot Liana, even if with 75% damage reduction. So, in any case though, I have Sage of the Trees decide to attack Omega instead. And he Peace of Minds with his Landius, right? Trying to move his Landius around my party to get back to Liana's healing. It's too far away. So now that I had taken out all of Omega's soldiers, he did barely any damage to Liana. Right? It's just Omega alone, and so at most he just damaged her soldiers a bit. Sage of the Trees wipes out Omega easily. Now it's just Hobo. Now it's just Landius and Liana against my party. And I can easily have Ledin melee attack and take down Landius' first life. And then Rosen Seal does a range attack, followed by Liana doing a range attack to take down Landius' second life. Game over. So even though Omega got the early Zerida kill, didn't matter. Once Bozel was dead, I had nothing to be afraid of. And Ledin with that Righteous Duel pulling enemies to me was pretty clutch. I actually made sure I could pull Ledin all the way to the back. That was on purpose. Right? By pulling him that far away from the rest of his party, he could not guard anyone, and he was just completely split off from his healing. He had to walk around my party to try to reach safety, which was way too far. So I did find the Landius Righteous Duel the Ledin Righteous Duel along with Zerida Assassinations to be really, really effective. And a lot of these Zerida fights were the same thing. Like you can see, like for example, that win was a Zerida fight. This win is a Zerida fight with Illustrial. This win is a Zerida fight. So this win is a Zerida fight, so I basically use Zerida like crazy to grind up. Other than that, I guess I'm gonna skip a lot of these Zerida ones, cause, well, you'd be watching me assassinate things over and over again. This one was very, very interesting though. I lost to Ashram. So Meow Sensei bringing Ashram, I had no idea what to do against his box. It ended up being a very interesting fight. So go through the pick ban first. Juggler, I ban his Liana healer to start and play Ledin. Because I saw he didn't, that was like his sole healer. So I lose Rosenseal and Reen next, and he starts off Juggler, a tank. So I get rid of Reen and Licorice, playing Yulia. Alestriel and Ares are banned, he plays Omega. And I get rid of Estellan and Melda, right, mobility buffers, playing my Zerida. 3-star Rosenseal. So now I lose Diglett and Liana, and Meow Sensei plays Ares next. Listel, Bozel ban, I play my Hobo. And I now lose Wowler and Licorice. So I don't have any, I have 2 combat healers but no dedicated healer. He plays Hobo as well. And I get rid of his Arianrod and Yusuke, leaving him another tank or Ashram. I decide to play Bozel, and he decides to play Ashram last. So, in the initial look at this, I actually thought I had a huge advantage over him, right? I felt I had the better assassin, I had 2 combat healers, while he only had 1 combat healer. And yeah, I had Bozel as well for sleep and so on. So looking at this, I actually really did think I had an advantage. But what ends up happening is the following. So, just doing some initial maneuvers, you know, faction buffing and so on and so forth, right? Side note, Hobo's faction buff buffs up everyone in my party, right? While Ledin can buff himself pretty much. So my whole party is faction buff too. And because I'm playing conservative right now, I decided to have Zerida rebuff herself. So what I realized looking at this though was all 3 of his frontal characters cannot be killed by Zerida. Okay. Ashram revives. It's a passive, but he revives. Hobo revives by Indomitable. Juggler doesn't revive, but he has so much defense that I can't kill him. So actually, I realized then that Zerida actually doesn't have an assassination target. So I'm initially hanging back, right? Zerida now does activate Bloodthirster. Other characters get Wave Whispered and knocked back a bit. And now after the Wave Whisper, in goes Ares, and that AoE took out Yulia. So my Yulia had very high magic defense, but her defense is nowhere near as high. And so Ares was able to Wind Whisper to kill her after she took damage from the Savory Tree's AoE. Mistake on my part, I probably should have laid down Wave Whisper, just laid it down just to have terrain effects. But whatever. Zerida runs up, assassinates the enemy Omega. What else can I do, right? But Juggler jumps in. Another AoE, then takes down both. So suddenly, you know, Ledin is basically useless at this point as well. So just like that, with multiple AoEs, I've lost 3 characters, so it's now 4 against 2. Very, very quickly, there's nothing I can do. So, I realized I didn't see any real win options afterwards, thinking about it. Because Zerida had very limited characters to assassinate, and he had enough AoEs to wipe me out. Side note, Ashram also has an AoE, right? He has the, the dragon something? Dragon Fire? I don't even remember what it's called. Let me quickly take a look. It's the same AoE Angelica has, though. Or, sorry, the same AoE Angelina has. Dragon's Breath, right? That's it. Self-targeting 2 span. So, despite everything, his Meow Sensei's box was actually AoE oriented with some single targets mixed in. Actually surprisingly nasty. As some people said earlier, right? There's a lot of weird boxes out there right now, and if you don't know what, what to pick or ban, you can get killed very easily. So next, there's a whole bunch of Zerida and Illustrial wins. That's actually what been my bread and butter. Playing Zerida, assassinating, and then wiping up, disabling tank, and you just keep going. So there's a Zerida win here. There's a Zerida win here. There's a loss to I think Rosalia here. A win by clock, so I'll probably skip that. And here's a match against a single target rush. Let's take a look at that one. So, NS's box is very, very heavy on single targets. It's not a complete single target box, but it has a good number. Rosalia, Sonya, Claret, Ares, Leon. You can say Dietlit is single target with the extra mobility that she gets. Yusuke is a follow-up after you lose a character. Zerida is pretty darn good tier 2 actually. And Tiaras can provide attack blessing. The only one that doesn't really work here in my opinion is Yulia. But Yulia is pretty nasty in her own right. Clock wins. I mean, sometimes you win by clocks, sometimes you lose by clocks. I just say whatever. The RNG kind of balances out in the long term, I figure. So by looking at this box, I felt my priority was to get rid of the healers, right? Attack blessing and healing and so on. So I got rid of Tiaras first. He gets rid of my Ledin first and plays Ares, which is very weird for this map, Cape of Sorrows, right? So I get rid of his remaining 2 healers, Iris and Waller, and I play Juggler. I'm kind of like, whatever, you can play whatever damage dealers you want. I'll just get rid of the healers first. I now lose my Ares and Hobo, and he plays Dietlit. So, Zerida and Akaya ban next. I'm going to play my Rosenseal. I lose Yulia and Omega. He plays Leon. He loses Juggler and Sonya. And I play Waller next. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of luck elements now. Things like, Tenyo's headdress, breeze, clocks. There's so many of these RNG effects that it's hard to you have to assume that those things will trigger. Anyway, so he has Ares, Dietlit, and Leon now, 3 damage dealers. My Green and Dietlit are banned, and he plays Yusuke, of course. So even more single target strikers, clearly. So I banned Yulia and Rosalia, playing my Zerida. He has a choice between Landius and Claret. Not a very good choice. he gets rid of my Licorice and Gizroth, and he ends up playing Claret. I still have the choice of Bozel or Leanna, and I choose to play Leanna. So I actually ended up with 1 tank, 3 healers, and Zerida. Look at this. Juggler with 3 healers against a whole bunch of single target strikers with no tank. So I did a very weird option here. I decided to throw in catapults onto Zerida. My thought process was with backstab, catapults doing extra damage to flyers, I should be able to wipe out, you know, Ares and Claret at range with this Zerida at 3 range. So, the usual initial maneuvers. And I'm just stacking buff after buff on my characters for now. Side note, all 3 of my healers do have Tenyo's headdresses, so I'm hoping, you know, as always, hoping for mobility buffs. I get 3 chances at it after all. So just maneuvering around a little bit, staying out of the enemy danger zone. And there's the mobility buff I was looking for. Right. With the high stakes activation on Wilder, Zerida got a +3 mobility. So the first set of 3 didn't give me anything, but the 4th one did end up giving me the mobility buff. So now Zerida has high range, 10 mobility with 3 range. You can go anywhere she wants in him, pretty much. So let's act again her. First, let's start with Sacred Beast him. Damage all of these enemies. And then I decided to have Zerida 2 range kill Yusuke right away. Since all those enemies were damaged, I could kill any of them. Now, Ares is going to get her Noble Charge attack onto my Juggler. Right? Juggler currently has an insane number of buffs. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 15 buffs on Juggler in total. 3 are going to get dispelled. Right? There's a luck element, but with 15 buffs, it was not that likely that I would lose the in-water one. That's why I stacked all 3 healers, right? I knew with high stakes, with Gospel, with the crystal effects from Rotenseal, I knew that Juggler would have so many buffs she wouldn't have any real issues. Zerida takes down Claret at 3 range, moves back into Juggler's guard range. And at that point, NS runs away. Nice and easy. It did kind of rely on getting that +3 mobility, of course, on Zerida, but as soon as I got it, there were no longer any issues. And as I mentioned, every turn I had 3 chances at a mobility buff, so it adds up. Let's see, where was I? I think I was a little bit further down. So Zerida versus single target rush. Hobo versus Arianrod. Another match against that guy, 7. Yeah. I'm actually torn between Gift of Eternal Life and Balance Blade, Jai. I haven't really decided yet. We'll see what I get from weapon gambles and so on. But either Gift of Eternal Life or Balance Blade for me. Well, let's take a look at this Hobo and Arianrod match. If you log in for 2 years, Michael, it's like 736 logins. So, any adjustments to my box here? I've removed Illustrial again and threw back Gizaroff. So, as I said, I've been kind of going back and forth with these box adjustments. So, Rosenseal ban for him, Juggler ban for me. I play Juggler, he plays Landius. I ban Rosenseal and Reen, I play Zerida. He bans my Liana, interesting, and Deedlit. And he plays Listel. So I get rid of Akaya and Liana, and I play Licorice. He gets rid of my Omega and Bozol here. So I got Zerida, and I got Licorice, but no more Bozol, no more Omega. And he plays Licorice as well. Interesting. So I ban his Sophia and Deedlit now. He actually does not have any. He just has Licorice as the healer at this point. And I play Hobo. So Gizaroff and Waller ban. He plays Arianrod. And I ban Bozol and Ares and decide to play Ledin as the final character rather than Yulia. Because, once again, I thought it was too important to have Righteous Duel over Yulia. Especially when he has Listel, right? Listel's Reaper's Touch would really crush Yulia. So, given that's the case, I decided that Ledin was the better option. Yeah, Gizaroff is not Yeles. Rainforce is Yeles Legends, but Gizaroff is just Mythical and Dark. Yeles and Mythical is Hobo, yes. So, once again, begin maneuvering. And this particular fight, I decided to have Licorice bring Mass Heal, Demonic Event, and Force of Darkness. She's not even bringing Dark Despair at all. Interestingly enough. And Hobo also has his faction buff. So I'm actually bringing 3 faction buffs here. Wait, 4! 4 faction buffs. I have Hobo with a faction buff. I have Ledin with a faction buff. I have Zerida with a faction buff. And I even have Licorice with a faction buff. Wow. Okay, whatever. So, Demonic Advance. Hoping for a mobility buff. Right? Didn't happen. I didn't care who got the mobility buff. I just wanted someone to get it. Either Zerida, Juggler, or Ledin. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. Well, so be it. Zerida begins with her Heart of Alhazard. And she runs forth to assassinate the enemy Zerida. And then retreat back. Right after that, the enemy Listel blood dances her. But she doesn't die. And I could take advantage of her positioning to pull Listel all the way back. Right? So normally it pulls the enemies to the closest location. But if that closest location is blocked, it actually pulls them to the other side. So once again, just like how that in the previous matches I pulled the Landius behind me, here once more I'm pulling a Listel behind me. Far, far away from Landius where she can no longer be guarded. Enemy has Dark Despair, launches it out. Right. Triggers clocks. Annoyingly enough, but it's fine. I'll mass heal to reduce some of that damage. And meanwhile, Master of Ice, teleportation next to Licorice and damage all these enemies. Any Reaper's Touch while he still can on my Juggler. And I just finish off Licorice in response. I'm taking a whole bunch of damage now because my Juggler is causing damage to my party. And it actually does... Actually, Listel damage reflected enough to cause my Licorice to die. That was actually really annoying. I didn't think that would happen. Right? Because she triggered Thorns, it did enough damage for my Juggler's heal to kill her. If Thorns didn't trigger, Licorice was alive. But unfortunately, Thorns triggered, Licorice died on my side as well. Nonetheless, at the very least, Hobo can provide some healing. And my Ledin is able to finish off the enemy Diglett. Or enemy Listel. So he's continuing to cause damage to my party by constantly striking my Juggler. And then Ariane Rod finishes off Juggler after that. Sage of the Trees strikes the enemy Landius. And then Juggler strikes the enemy Landius to take down 1 life. So now Sage of the Trees fighting Ariane Rod. And there's not much I can do other than faction buff up. Ariane Rod. Double AoE. Takes down Hobo's first life. Hobo does a range attack and leaves Ariane Rod with 275 hit points. 2%. If I had a 6-star Hobo, Ariane Rod was dead. But I don't, so Ariane Rod barely survives. Nonetheless, I got a good amount of healing on Sage of the Trees that way from the attack. Crystal Warlock's healed up to full. Sage of the Trees got a bit over half hit points, so I'll take it. And then he's retreating, so I decide to have Ariane Rod launch out, or I decide to have Hobo launch out his Wave Whisper to finish off Ariane Rod. Pushing you into poison doesn't kill you. You can always move back out of it. It pushes you like 2 back, or you can move 3 tiles forward. So, with Ariane Rod dead, battle's over. I think it's only 2 tiles. It's not enough for a character. A character can definitely move back out. So, ultimately, using all of these combat healers has been working out pretty well. I have no idea what I did this match. Single target mythic? Let's see what this one's all about. Oh, so my opponent's running a single target box. I don't know what I'm running, but this was odd because SP Elwin was not really out yet, but he already has a Lancer Elwin in his box. He has Florentia, he has Rosenseal, a crazy number of single targets once again. Let's see what happens here. I start with Juggler, I ban his Juggler, he banned my Ares, playing Rosen Seal to start of all things for a single target box. Oddest thing I've seen in a while. Okay, Arian Rod, Omega, and Zerida are now banned. Right? So he's gotten rid of both of my assassins right away. His Landius and Yulia are banned, and I play Yulia to start. So he gets rid of Deedlit and Roten Seal, playing Elwin now. Actually, pretty nasty anyways, right? Elwin's Sword Soul is a nightmare against Juggler. So I get Liana, and I lose Gizaroff and Licorice. He plays Illustrial, I then ban his Deedlit and Rachel, and I play Hobo yet again. Right. I now lose Ledin and Wowler. He plays Rosalia, and I have the choice between Reen and Bozo. But first I ban Sonya and Yusuke, and I decide to play Bozo. And finally he plays Florentia. So he ends up with 2 healers and 3 single target strikers. While I end up with, sleep, healing, healing, healing. No Reen because with Rosen Seal on the map, Reen doesn't do all that much, I think. So I actually flipped Bozol to bring in Black Hole, Fireball, and Dark Reaper. So single target Bozol, single target Yulia, of course, Liana for Act Again, Hobo for faction buffing, and Juggler for just the jump. Yeah, Rosalia is quite good if you can build her up. It's not like she's a bad hero, it's just that grinding the shards of her is expensive. The high mobility is pretty nice. So, since everyone in my party has been faction buffed by Sage of the Trees, I decided to use Gospel, Liana Gospel herself. So it's not like Gospel would help against any of these enemies anyways, right? They don't apply debuffs. So, and in the first place, if I Gospel Juggler, Sword Soul would probably remove it anyways. So I decided to just have Liana Gospel herself, provide more healing. Celestial jumps in, takes out my Yulia's first life. So I start by having Sage of the Trees, single target attack. And I might as well act again. Right, try changing the turn order kind of thing. And Bozol, Dark Reaper finishes off Celestial. So, Suicidal Strike! Yay! Rosalia jumps in. I'm not sure what he's expecting with Rosalia, but Juggler doesn't die. And now Yulia jumps in with Godly Menace, killing off Rosalia and healing up Juggler. Bozol now gets launched with a Fireball attack on the enemy. Resounding Might, followed by an Act Again on Elwin. But I actually activated Breeze on Yulia, so she gets to jump up, finish off that Elwin before he can do anything, and quickly ending the fight. Single targets like this doesn't really work without any kind of mobility buff. I'm waiting for an SP DiHarto. He is currently the worst protagonist, right? Like if we look at all the protagonists in the game, the SSR protagonists, Ledin is good, Elwin is good, Liana is good, Tierras is good, Landis is good. A lot of people still use Rachel. Sigma is now very good with SP Sigma. Lambda, to be fair, Lambda's probably pretty bad. But yeah, all the other protagonists have use. The only protagonist that is actually truly useless is DiHarto. And I suppose Lambda. Right? So if I was to expect an SP class, I'm expecting DiHarto to get one. He's just a Bond Goblin you're supposed to hate. If you say it that way, then Elwin should suck too. But Elwin doesn't. Yeah, I mean, Lambda does have clock shenanigans with AoEs. I still think she's terrible. But that's a personal opinion. So, I'm expecting DiHarto to get an SP class. Please make my 6-star DiHarto actually useful. Mine is sitting there completely useless for quite some time now. We're actually getting close to the end of all this. So at this point, I'm moving to the more recent matches now. The matches where I've been stuck at 1800 rank. So why don't we start with this match against Michuzak. He's running a proper single target strike box. Okay. Now I also played this like crap, but it's worth showing his single target strike box. He's actually, from what I know, his Akaya is totally unbuilt. It's just here to provide mobility buffing. So other than that, he has tons of high mobility characters. Zerida, Deedlit, Leon, right? Hiei, Toguro Bros, Ares, Rosalia, Yusuke, Claret, Alastriel. He even has a cavalry juggler mixed in. So he's going for purely high mobility or mobility buffers or damage increaser. So what ends up happening is I banned his juggler first, which is a mistake. I realized this later, but I should probably ban Akaya first, right? I realized from this match actually. I played my Ledin after he banned my juggler. He bans Hobo and Rosenseal and plays Akaya right away. So I banned Tierras and Deedlit, playing my Liana, and I lose Yulia and Gizarov. Alastriel gets played on his side. So get rid of Ares and Hiei, trying to get rid of assassins and single target strikers, and I play Waller. Now I lose both Deedlit and Omega, so he's gotten rid of most of my single target strikers. And he plays Zerida. I ban Claret and Imelda, and then I play Bozo, which is probably a mistake, a big mistake actually. I should have played Ares here. Big mistake on this pick. Well, I lose Zerida and Reen, and he plays Rosalia. So I have to choose between Licorice and Ares, and for some reason, I don't know why I didn't pick Ares. Even now, I'm still not sure. So I lose Estelle, I ban his Estelle and ban his Toguro Bros, leaving him Leon and Yusuke. Probably another mistake, looking at it now. He's going for a high mobility party, so in that case, leaving him Estelle is okay. Leaving his Estelle is okay. I should have probably banned, Toguro Bros and Leon, or Toguro Bros and Yusuke. Whatever. I play Licorice, and he plays Yusuke. So, as always, I start by trying to mobility buff. Failed both of them. And he starts off with Zerida activating Bloodthirster right away. As I mentioned, I've been playing really like I played like crap, and this is one of the examples, right? I moved up instead of moving back. So Zerida now has the ability to attack my Bozo, for example. I should have very much shifted backwards, not moved up. But I trigger high stakes and start maneuvering forward a bit more. Actually, I think one of the mistakes I made here is that I actually thought these were cliff tiles, but they're actually city wall tiles. So they're actually very easy to move through. So big mistake on my part there. Didn't really click on them, and these are city wall tiles that you can move through. So Lestrio charges up, on rush attacks Licorice, and kills her off. Also a surprise to me there, because I did assume that while there's high stakes, with full hit points, I might be able to survive Lestrio's attack. Didn't happen. Right? And being in forest, of course. So I thought all of those combined might make me survive Lestrio. Nope. Not with 30% attack increase on both herself and her soldiers. So very quickly, lose one character right away. I then move up and just pull Zerida to me because I know I can't reach any of the other. I can't stop Rosalia, for example. So I figured might as well kill this character. And next, what happens is Rosalia charges up like crazy, chivalries, drops the Sword of Protection, gets to move again, and then kills off Bozo as well. Ah, Iskarka, that's probably why I didn't pick Ares, you're right. Now that you mention it, you're right. Because Elestrial got played, I decided that there was no way to keep Ares alive. So, interesting box, that's for sure, for Michizak. Basically 4 single target strikers moving up one after another to keep attacking. And I'm gonna just do one last battle coverage, and I think that will be it for today. No, Michael, because Elestrial has too much movement as long as there's terrain on the map. Right? Elestrial has 5 movement and 3 range, and if there's any terrain, she gets to move through it for free. So as long as there's forests and whatnot, she can move really far. And in addition, with Akaya in play, she gets another additional 2 mobility. So you're talking about 7 mobility, 5 ignored, 5 free movement through terrain, versus Ares' 9. Yeah, because Akaya got picked first, I knew that Ares was useless. So thank you for catching that, Iskarka. Alright, and the very final battle is, after that one against Mizuchak, I decided to try to swap it. I think I decided to swap in Akaya into my box itself. As I mentioned, I'm still experimenting with the boxes that I want to run. So here, I'm running Elestrial and Zerida with Akaya in the box. And then everyone else is pretty much the same. You know, Gizarov has basically disappeared from my box. There is still Bozo and Licorice though. And here we go. So first ban was Juggler. I ban his Juggler and I start with Ledin. I then lose Hobo and Rosenseal, and he plays Albedo, a tank. So I get rid of Rosenseal and Reen on his side, and I play my Elestrial. Leanna and Reen are now banned. He plays Leanna. So I get rid of SP Elwin and Yulia, playing Waller now. Zerida and Licorice are now banned, and he plays Hobo. And then I now ban his Arianrod and Zerida, playing my Akaya. A very, very late successful pick of Akaya. Quite rare, frankly. Bozal and Ares are banned, and he plays Bozal. And finally I have the choice between Yulia and Dietlit. But first, I ban Ares and Dietlit, so he has left with Sophia or Landius. Right, so either 2 tanks, 1 healer, or 1 tank, 2 healers. And I play Yulia as the final character. It was a tough choice between Yulia and Dietlit, but I thought Yulia would offer me more options. And he plays Landius. So to start, Light Array, and I just faction buff. Why do I not run Cav Akaya? For now, I don't really have any good stats on my Akaya, so it doesn't really matter what I run. Right. In terms of mobility and moving up to attack, I think Cav Akaya would... A Cav Akaya that has to do like melee range attacks against Landius is kind of useless. So I'm kind of using a support Akaya with multiple skills. Cav Akaya really needs you to bring Dark Reaper, right? And I'm not bringing it. Blood of Ishika summons... Blood of the Shika summons the wolf for me to activate Wild Power. And so with Wild Power activated, Celestial now has 7 movement, along with a lot of terrain ignoring movement. Yes, Apex is quite time consuming. Even just match reviews take a long time, let alone playing them out. So now that I'm mobility buff, I'm gonna take the most advantage of all this by having Waller high stakes right away. I was also hoping for another mobility buff there, of course, but didn't quite get it. Nonetheless, it does mean almost everyone can move very far. Can't quite get into range due to Dazzling Lights, but in 2 turns I will definitely be in combat. And Celestial gets to attack and take down the first life off Hobo. I wasn't afraid to attack because I knew that Celestial would heal to full health with Waller. He shield bashed my Celestial to stun her. But as far as I can tell, he doesn't really have anything that can actually kill Celestial. So I decided to just start with Aka attacking, single target strike, whatever. And then next, Ledin jumps in with a Righteous Duel. That was a miscalculation on my part. I forgot that Landius can guard against it, but it's okay. I can start weakening his Landius dramatically. And he successfully launches Black Hole against me. So lots of characters get silenced, lots of characters take damage. Never a good thing to get that. But I think I dispelled before this so that I can use Celestial, right? Let's see. No, I didn't. Hold on. So, yeah, I didn't. So I just got AoE. Ah, okay. So my characters couldn't do anything that turn. It's the new turn. So I was able to have Celestial attack. Because Celestial came out of the stun state last turn. And now on this turn, I had the Celestial strike. Like so. And with the second attack, down goes Hobo's second life. Remember what I mentioned about having high magic defense on Yulia? Once again, the high magic defense protects me from Bozal. Right? Bozal had 1,616 int, didn't really get through Yulia's soldiers though. So that's why I keep running Yulia with high magic defense. Then moves into the middle of the enemies, disabling the enemy Langrisser's guard once again. Right? So now that I'm in the middle of all these enemies, in fact both Albedo's guard and Langrisser's guard is disabled. I then begin by having Wilder cast Dispel. Surprisingly, she had so many debuffs, 5 of them, that the Dispel couldn't remove them all. So she still had the silence effect on her. At least she can heal though, right? If the cannot be healed effect remained, that would have been rough. Nonetheless, that removed the debuffs on Akaya as well as Yulia. So now I can have Yulia melee attack disposal to start. Ripping up her soldiers. And then Akaya can now use the act again on my Celestial, so that Celestial can finish off Bozal. So, with that, no more damage dealers for Evolution, battle done. In that instance, Ledin brought the enemy to the top of him. Let me just go back. Oops. Yeah, let me take a quick look. I actually wasn't paying attention where Ledin's 3C put the enemy. So let me just jump. Let's see. Next step. Next step. Next step. Oh, I see. You're talking about from here, right? When I Righteous Dueled? Okay. Righteous Duel pulled this guy to the closest tile. Okay. I usually Righteous Duel a character that's in front of me. So when I moved Ledin here to, if I Righteous Dueled Liana, Liana will show up behind me. But because I Righteous Dueled Sage of the Trees, which was above me, Sage of the Trees ended up in the forest tile here. Yeah. Actually, in hindsight, it probably was better for me to Righteous Duel Liana behind me. Because if she ended up behind me like this, I could have had, let's say, Liana weaken her, and then had Yulia strike her to kill her off. Right. So I could have killed off Liana right away, which would have simplified the battle a bit. Rather than Righteous Dueling Sage of the Trees here. I mean, at the end of the day, I won anyways, so it didn't really affect the end outcome, but yeah, there's various other things I could have done there. Alright, so I'm just gonna stop this recording here. That Akaya, the Akaya assault was kind of interesting. And I'll see which battles I review for next week instead. So, that's it for this recording. Thanks for watching, everyone. Yeah, it's been interesting though. I'm still playing around with my box. Like, I have not finalized it, but I have been removing my, let's say, Bozol and Licorice. Not sure if that's a good idea. Right now I threw in more assassins, but we'll see how it plays out. Yeah. As I said, I'm still experimenting. Remove Licorice and Bozol for more assassins. I don't know if that's a good idea, but at the same time, in order to fit SP Elwin in, someone had to get removed. So this is kind of like a work in progress. I'm playing around with characters I'm keeping and characters I'm removing, and we'll see. One thing I have to do is I really do need to finalize my Akaya equipment. Like right now, she's using garbage. So Akaya is probably one of my top priorities to upgrade right now. I don't know if I'm going to re-enchant her everything away from Breeze, or if I'm going to just keep rolling to try to get attack to take advantage of Blood of the Sheikah, or what. Yeah. Speaking of SP Freya, I actually used her a few times. Like if I take a look at a more recent match, I started experimenting with her. So you can see there's Ledin, there's SP Freya, and there's Juggler right in this box. So like I said, I'm playing around with my various boxes and options, and we'll see how this all works out. There's too many SSRs I want to build, Elwin. Not just SP heroes. So. Alright, so that's it. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'll stream again. I'll do some more match reviews next week, but this stream was pretty much caught up to what I've been doing, which was relying on Zerida to assassinate things. Until I can't, like when I run into characters who revive or have extremely high defense. But that's it for now. So see you all, I guess, next week. And on that note,